well, power hasn't changed.
No.
Class hasn't changed, despite what everybody says. Class hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't. It really
hasn't. Use other words, you know.
No, it hasn't. I mean, and I guess I go back to that, you know, that quote of Raymond Willaims about education being the means of social change, and going back to what I was saying about the University of Leicester lecturers, it seems to me that those people, the fearful thing for me at the moment is a kind of rise of anti-intellectualism bordering on fascism, pardon the expression. I'm not overstating it, I don't think.
No, I don't disagree.
Where you know, intellectuals are not just being there's a danger they're being demonstrably cut out, stamped upon, whatever you want to describe it as, and that is fear-inducing. I think where adult education for me has been so powerful, and this is what Raymond Willaims absolutely espoused, the idea of education for social change. You know, not just being the bottle or the message in the bottle, but being part of the movement that motivates and moves that bottle. You know, being the sea in a way, being
absolutely.
You know, being the social change, not just a you know, a conveyance or a message.
You understand this because you're like me. I mean, I've always worked in universities, but I've always worked in them in funny ways. And I actually think that universities are going to be stamped on because they are seen as left. You know, they are left. But I can just see that systematic. I mean, I come across these awful people in business schools in my current job. I mean, some of them are really sound, you know, and you think, and they've ended up in business schools. They don't really know why, because their other things have disappeared. But you know, there are other people who are there who are very, you know, they're fully focused in on a very narrow employability agenda and a very narrow market. You know, all that's
human capital model.
Totally, you know, and I think there's more of them actually, almost than there used to be. But then it also, it's one of the reasons why, you know, the Cooperative University project was interesting to me and remains so, because I'm not sure anymore, given what's happened with the metrics and TEF and REF, if it's the radical place to be. You know, a university. I mean, I know people are in there. You know, I know lots of best friends are in there, but you know. It's
almost fighting near, you know, a kind of neoliberal, you know, tsunami, not just a wave, a tsunami. You know, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it is. But I actually, sadly, I don't think universities are going to win. So you know, then you have to think of alternative ways of doing things.
You do.
I think what is interesting, and I'm almost, because I do quite a lot around worker co-ops and things. I think we've got probably as near to, you know, I was, you know, lived through the 70s and 80s. I think we're as near to what almost is a counterculture, as we have been, you know, since then, really. But it's not necessarily. It's very much based on individual interest.
It is, and I guess what it doesn't have is that connection of work, going back to where we started, because it's not a collective structure of feeling, actually, is it? I think one of the things I feel politics has become very individualized. And if I get nostalgic about anything, it's not necessarily about the work. You know, I think of my dad for 15 years of his life down a pit, you know, his body getting, you know, without being sentimental at all, but his body getting attacked by coal and bruised and battered and all the rest of it, like his dad before him. And there's nothing beautiful about that per se. No. But there is dignity in collectivism, isn't there? And associationism. And that's exactly what Raymond Willaims was aware of. You know, he said, when, you know, the My Cambridge bit that really resonates with me, you know, this was never my Cambridge, he said, you know, and it was. And why was I supposed to be in awe of these kind of loud, brutish, what did he call them? Not opinionated, completely self-assured, braying individuals, you know. But they rule at the moment. This is the problem. They rule, and I think they're still deeply afraid, like Virginia Woolf was, like even Orwell was at times, of a kind of mass of people coming together who articulate literally a different vision of the world. And that's what I fear, that we're losing the capacity to come together. And I do, but you know, like you, I do feel like we're on the cusp of something powerful as a counterculture. But we've got to find a way of bringing people together somehow. This is what I see what I'd passionately love to be able to do better myself if I had the capacity, or, networks even, even having conversations about this is really important.
Oh God, yeah. But you know what? I think this is where I do worry about me being negative, and I don't think I am. I really don't want to be, but I'm a bit frightened of people coming together as well. But that's because I don't see the collective. I don't, and I'm certainly not being nostalgic about some of the stuff from the past, the sort of labour hierarchies, gender, racism, let's face
it,
a lot of stuff was vile.
It was vile, and I can attest to that. Yeah, as a girl in a mining community, I can, a smart girl, whatever.
Unimaginative, people not encouraged to be
abusive,
ideas above the station and all that.
Yeah, and being
so we wouldn't want to glamorize any of that.
Definitely not.
But what sort of freaks me, I suppose, is when I do see people coming together, it's not for things that I would necessarily think it's worth coming together for. Like, who's the enemy here? Who's the real?
But this goes right back
to that's a lack of political education, which you and I.
That's exactly right, and that's right, and that's what I think effectively Raymond Willaims was arguing for. Interdisciplinarity.
Yeah.
Cultural studies, but bringing subjects together to critically analyze where you sit in relation to all these structures, exposing them, being aware of them. And that's what I think we mustn't lose. And that's what I think is what I'm fearful of us losing. If they're kind of getting rid of critical academics and intellectuals, what does that say about the hegemony? It's becoming more and more strangling. But we're never going to get anywhere by people with, and this sounds horrible, banging on about individual issues either.
No,
there's a great obsession, I think, and this is where I have kind of generational issues around people individualizing and personalizing experience and not being able to look beyond. And I'm not decrying anyone's individual experience phenomenologically, but what happens actually sharing experiences. That's
no, it doesn't. I'm up to here with it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Particularly this last year, and this isn't to diminish or undermine or in any way, but if I hear one more person say, well, nobody will listen to me because I've got mental health issues, I'm thinking, well, the last 10 features on this radio program have been about mental health.
I know.
That's massively, I'm not, I couldn't believe, Andrew, my own partner,
it's overstating it, isn't it, in a massive way all the time.
So it is problematic, I think. But the other point, I think one of the things, and how do I put this? I also don't think that critical academics have done themselves any favours either. One of the reasons I went to the college, there are a number, but one of the reasons I left HE was partly because of the sort of I felt the managerial culture around HE, and I didn't feel it was being adequately pushed back, because actually academia, as you know, is quite an individualised experience. And I didn't think, I understand why, and I would defend them to the end of my day, I don't want to see any attacks, but, sometimes you have to, and you're like me. You've always had this balance between being a practitioner and frankly being an intellectual, and I've always felt comfortable with that. But a lot of intellectual life is within the academy and doesn't come outside. And never, it can be valid and it can be wonderful and great stuff, but if it's not out there being real, then
Yes, and that's the thing, and that's why it's very easy to get polarization going on. You know, like you're told that there's a particular equality, diversity, inclusion agenda. Class doesn't figure, for example.
No.
You know, and that discourse is not really allowed. Instead, you get into kind of post-structuralist discourse, and I find that deadening, actually.
What would Willaims have made of? Because Willaims, he was so keen. He's like E.P. Thompson, you know. I mean, he wanted to. He was committed to adult education.
Yeah.
He got what it was to be out in communities.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how big a brain anyone had.
No.
They also had that
it's the lived experience thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And culture is ordinary. They're the things
massive.
Absolutely. They're fundamentally what has absolutely empowered me about his work.
I love that. I shared that with everyone, and so I've even just been going back to that. I'm sorry, it's not elevating me, but even since I've been in this job, I think I told you when I got to know some really nice people who are running the sort of culture and leisure things at Rochdale Council.
Yeah.
When I came into post, and I was saying, why aren't we doing? The college wasn't doing anything in Rochdale. And I didn't get it. We've got the bloody museum there, and anyway, and we got a bid and were successful. In fact, Stephen Year put in a really big bid to English Heritage for their town hall, which is a Grade 2 listed building, and it's absolutely magnificent.
Incredible,
yeah. But one of the things I shared around with people like Darren Grice was Culture is Ordinary. That one chapter, that opening chapter, and I just thought, and I felt a bit weird doing it, and it was, but the comments and the responses I had from council officers just saying, because it's so readable and so powerful and relevant and a lovely way in, but they were also saying, every one of them said, because I was a bit embarrassed after I'd done this, I thought, oh God, I'm trying, maybe they think I'm just being a bloody academic, but every one of them wrote to me and said what a pleasure it had been, and how they hadn't had, most of them had got a degree at some stage on the way, they hadn't had a chance to read anything like that, and they're planners and technocrats.
It's
not, they loved it.
Yeah, because it challenges you, doesn't it? It makes you think differently.
No.
More than that, I found it massively empowering, that whole, this wasn't my Cambridge, but these were my people. I mean, these worlds might not be there anymore, but that kind of, that sense of place and connection to the landscape that Willaims had. I find that really powerful. I mean, it's like when I read D.H. Lawrence, who, I've got numerous problems with, but he's got this tremendous sense of connection to a landscape and a place. And it's my landscape and place by, obviously because of where I live. And there's something tremendously powerful about that, because that is much less likely to change in an obvious way. And that's why I don't know, I get tremendous power from that. But culture is ordinary, that sense of we all have culture. There's not a high culture and a low culture. I get so sick of that. Education's been so much about social reproduction for me in so many ways. You're supposed to, you're supposed to like opera if you're cultured. I hate it personally. I really hate it.
I've been to one, but that was enough.
I've been to two, and I just wanted to claw my way out of the building with the renters. Oh dear. Anyway, so but there's these notions that some cultures are better than others. It's so prevalent, and you're only able to get into cultural work in this country if you've got money and capital to back you nowadays. That's the other terrifying thing. What happened to the punk movement, where people got together, and I'm not glamorizing it either, but that kind of notion of punk being kind of self-taught, instinctive, local, working class, grassroots, whatever. I mean, I'm not glamorizing it because it wasn't all that, but culture is ordinary is really important.
Absolutely, and it's funny actually. It's just reminded me that one of the projects I'm involved in at the moment, and I don't. Cult Cymru is it's a combination of creatives, as they call these days, but also back to the union and equity, And it's basically about trying to open up pathways, or to try and challenge what's the precarity around cultural work. And there was a room full of youngish people, and just going back to what we've been saying, really, you know, they are very confident in their understanding and belief in what culture is, and in a way we've got to trust them. And I think you know, maybe Willaims would have done, you know, just going back to what we've said about people are of their time, and actually there is, you know, there is continuity, and they're different continuities. It's all different, it's all changed, but it's still all the same.
But do you think that there's a continuity, isn't there, in that you're at a particular age in your life, and maybe you are more self-assured, and because the possibilities of things being different are maybe not as clear to you, which is why I think, coming to the question I wanted to ask you, kind of, you know, to last, I suppose, is why he's still relevant, why I think structure feeling's still pretty vital, you know, because yeah, you're part of a culture, a time and a place. You're part of a community, or whatever that might look like. It doesn't have to be a place-based community, it can be interest or whatever it might be. But you get to certain other points in your life where you start to question some of those assurances or certainties that you have, don't you? We're sort of describing some of that.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, you know, you start to recognize that things are not as you thought they were. You start to see other perspectives. And I don't know about you, but my mind, since I got into my kind of mid-40s, has gone like that.
Totally
not like that. It's
the opposite.
Massively, because I've become less certain about things and less self-confident. And I don't mean that in a pathetic way. I'm not going to crumble and go and hide in a corner and cry. You know, I mean, I've just become less assured about things, less certain.
But it's a funny, no, but there's something else going on as well, because I totally agree with you. But I still find Willaims incredibly important, because there's no doubt that structures of feeling, even if I don't continuously articulate how I see the world like that, in that conceptual framework, that is sort of how I see the world, actually.
Yeah.
But your other point is that actually, I think we've you know, it's something to do with, we've just been decrying and slagging off interests, but actually we do it in a slightly different way. So in other words, and I think it's something to do, I mean, I could be really depressed and say it's about postmodernism and everything, you know, all that's solid melts into air, that classic, one of the best, most powerful thing that Marx ever, that sentence is, still takes my breath away, you know. But so in some ways, those old certainties, for if it's all about crumbling and fragmenting and rearranging for us, what's it like for these generations who've come after us, who don't even have those sort of points to hold on to?
I agree, because you know,
they're out of order.
Yeah. I mean, and they don't even have that. That's why we still have the role of adult education is so vital, and I still think I'm passionate, and I'm going to be passionate till the day I drop dead, you know, about adult education, because that emancipatory strand is so important. I saw what it did for my dad, and it's not about learning or becoming educated or cultured. It's about having your mind opened, you know. And that's so crucial, and remembering and learning from the past as well as the present, not being disconnected from history, recognizing it.
But it is also about being radical, and I'm unapologetic about that.
I agree with you completely.
No, I don't want my mind open to become a bloody Tory.
No, I certainly don't.
Don't close it.
No, please. No, absolutely not. No, but we're not going to get it unless people are given those kind of tools to think and be challenged, you know, and get the chance to talk about these issues. And I mean, I've been political education officer for a while in Mansfield, as you know, for the Labour Party, and I've had a few interesting moments, but we've talked about Brexit, you know, and it wasn't people being racist, you know, and throwing punches at one another and being kind of crude and in that way. It was people really enjoying the chance to talk about issues in a space with other people who might not agree with them. You know, actually throwing the issues around. Same about education as emancipation or social reproduction, etc. People love these kind of debates, but we're not getting anywhere near enough of that at the moment. That's what I feel so crucial.
I mean, I want to just come back to that, but I did just want to say that the one thing that makes me slightly nervous about, I have to say, I'm sound like I'm stepping back here, but something about, I was just going to say when you were describing that, it almost took me back to that paragraph I read out, which was how so much gets obscured.
Yeah.
That you lose sight of the true relations.
Yeah.
But that also makes me a bit nervous, because that if it was a sort of a dogmatic Marxist on this call with us, they'd say, oh yeah, false consciousness. And I think that's a bit, that makes me nervous, because I'm not sure how much this runs into that paragraph. Is there an element of that? In other words, because what we're sort of saying is, if we had enough political education, then people would get it. Sort of
yes, we are.
I'm being self-critical of me.
Yeah. And I'm not really.
Is that in there, and is that something to be concerned about? And no, what just popped up on my screen. I mean, I know this is rotten of me, because of why shouldn't you do this? But what just popped on my screen was, don't forget to join today's WEA lecture, An Introduction to Castles. And I thought, well, probably that's sort of interesting, but oh God.
I know, but that's it. I mean, that's what we talked about on Friday, at the event. It was all about, if you're going to foster community debate, dialogue, democracy, whatever, you need social purpose education. You need, and I don't know. I'm not really sure about the false consciousness stuff, coming back to what you were saying before. So what would he, I mean, I'm never really sure what exactly false consciousness is. Is it just not understanding why you are in the position you're in?
I think I don't know, because far be it from me to interpret Marx to that stuff. But no, I mean, to be fair, I think it pretty much is the notion of you have a dominant ideology.
Yeah.
So, we can map that against some of Williams's thinking quite easily.
Yes.
So you have a dominant ideology, which is so powerful.
Yeah.
That it obscures, to use a word of use, obscures true meaning and the true nature of what fundamentally Marx was writing about, was the extraction of surplus value and power relationships and the ownership of the means of production.
Yeah.
So it gets sort of lost because people don't question it, they don't challenge it. There's no critical.
No, and I think you need to critique that just as. I mean, that's what I like about. I asked Raymond Willaims, children, what they perceived his political position to be, and I think they described him as an anarcho-syndicalist.
Yeah, I don't think he's far off an anarchist position. Well,
I thought that was really interesting.
I mean, I would personally class myself probably as near as an anarcho-communist as now. I think because I don't reject theory, or I think there's and I think we have to be quite structured over some things, and but
the level of discourse on politics, I suppose, going back to what we were saying, has become so denatured, debased, soundbite orientated, slippery, anti-intellectual. I know I use that phrase, but I really think it. That I suppose what I'm getting at, and it's not political education, it's more about an emancipation of the mind. If that doesn't sound too vague, I don't know. I don't know.
But that's the outcome, isn't it? It's how you get to that.
It is.
But I've even been struggling, and this is because I'm in this very strange place thinking about me and Malcolm Noble writing about this bundle thing. And it's almost that fragment. It's almost so complicated.
Yeah.
That it's almost hard to pin down.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to beat myself up over that. I think we're in that time.
That's where we are. Yeah.
We are. But but it is really complicated because I'm not even that sure I'm comfortable using the word education, because has it got hierarchical? Is it something that's done too?
Yeah.
I feel a bit nervous. I mean, I don't want to be over semantic, and you could go nuts, couldn't you, really? But
no, that's right. I mean, and it's
so
not
I'm not sure that's the right word for me. I don't know. I don't know. Genuinely.
I think debate is kind of where I'm at. I think being able to discuss issues, even if it's uncomfortable. It's like we're in a time of no platforming people who don't agree on trans issues, for example, or have got a different perspective on gender, and that worries me deeply. We should be having conversations. We shouldn't be abusing people if they don't take a particular line. This is about ideology, not just being dominant, but something terrifying. An absolute hegemony that totally controls the discourse, that's dangerous. And I think that's why I love Raymond Willaims, because he continually critiques language. He continually exposes what we take as taken for granted or common sense, and exposes it to the cold light of day. It's that rigor, isn't it? It's that kind of that, like we were saying right at the start, that laser-like capacity to just absolutely nail something.
It's interesting here, because you said about his relevance now, and we've also agreed in this conversation that some of his points of reference have gone. I think. But his criticality, his
lens, almost
his methodology, is as relevant and pertinent and as important as ever. Although I adore Raymond Willaims, and you more than me, I think. I do adore him, but you know a lot about him. But I can still stand back a bit and say, well, yeah, I would have if he was in the room now, a discussion about that.
Exactly.
But it's the way he does it, though, and that takes us back to even those weary planners in Rochdale Council. they actually referenced grey old Susan Planner wrote, but they adored the writing. They understood it.
Exactly.
He spoke to them. So
exactly.
So it's that important, right up to now.
Absolutely, and it goes back to the whole idea of resources for hope. I suppose that's what I keep coming back to. I mean, I was just looking up my PowerPoint presentation, because there were a couple of brilliant quotes that I was trying to find, because I
love that book.
Absolutely, but that one, to be truly radical is to make hope possible rather than despair convincing. I just think that's so incredibly powerful and so absolutely necessary at the moment.
And it's just not where we are now.
No.
Because all we've got, frankly, or what it feels like, it's hard, because I've only got my finger on some pulses, not all pulses, is it does feel a time of despair and defeat,
Exactly, which is why coming together on Friday, I know it's it's one of 3 events. It
sounded wonderful.
But it was great to hear people. I hate the word resilient, and I refuse to use it in this context, but not being resilient, because that language has been used therapeutically. I've totally appropriated, but it was about people fostering their own response to the despair, and being at a very localized level, responding to people's real needs, giving people a voice. I know it's overused, but really important at the moment, and telling stories that are difficult for people to hear, like refugees coming in and what they'd fled from, not the rhetoric of, all these poor people, these vulnerable people, which is that liberal bullshit that I can't do.
Oh, no.
And then on the other hand, you know, people who despise them just for what they are and the fact that they've come to our country and they're taking our resources, and which is equally, well, even more pernicious. But actually telling their stories, you know, the fact that they were ordinary people driving a taxi in a town in their own country in Syria, and then suddenly in the middle of a night a man came and out of the, and just thinking of the terror that engenders in me.
Yeah.
That absolute fear of fascism. You know, a boot comes down on your family, you're turfed out of your house, you're told something is wrong with you just because perhaps you've got a different culture or a different religious background. I mean, God, that is terrifying.
Yeah.
And they come away to get away from that.
And look what they've got to put up with.
I know, exactly. That was powerful, because that was stories, people telling their own stories, and more than that, people creating a platform for them to be heard.
But you know what I mean, you can't do this, but it would be really interesting research. The people who attended that webinar on Friday because I think if I look back at my own history and my own life, what's made me, and let's use the word resilient, because although it's been appropriated and neoliberalism's gone bonkers with it, you know, it's still quite a useful word.
It is.
Because it's about how you are in the world and what you, and it says a lot about your philosophy. You know, I mean, I'm a Stoic as well, and I think, you know, I've concluded I am now. I've read about it, but you know, so that's, and I have to work at it sometimes, but actually I don't have to work very hard.
No,
you just sort of how it is, you know, and you deal with it.
It is.
How much has political education, and I'm thinking about Raymond Willaims as well, and it, you know, its role, how much has that enabled that room full of people on Friday to continue to be full of hope, and to have, you know, to have moments where you get fed up, to have moments where you're down, to have, but actually to continue to be resilient
and to keep on going, keep going. Exactly that. You know,
you do wonder what role political education or social purpose education.
Absolutely. Well, it was really interesting because one person used Maslow, but as a lens, understanding, and I think that's really relevant. That was a practitioner, someone who understands that, you know, if you're focusing on the absolute base level needs, because that's where you are, you're not going to be able to do so many other things in life, absolutely necessarily, which I think is absolutely right. But a lot of people reference Freire.
Yeah, they do. Very common.
And I know, and obviously Raymond Willaims too. But, you know, I mean, I pulled out a couple of quotes from Lyndon West because I think he wrote really powerfully about this. You know, he said, the best traditions of adult education and informal learning allow people to challenge the taken for granted without experiencing paralyzing anxiety. And in the
gives you a confidence and a bravery, actually.
Exactly. And the cultivation of relationships in which individuals feel legitimate and can restore resilience. That for me sums it up. That's the framework.
You're absolutely right, but actually it's also about, and I'm sounding like I'm contradicting myself, it's also about being educated in a certain way.
Yeah,
I think, you know, because it's still the most important thing there is. And it doesn't matter. It's got nothing to do with any of your capitals, social, cultural, economic, human. If you have been educated or you have engaged with education in a certain way, and maybe it's not even a method or a model. I don't know, but maybe it's about your disposition and who you are.
It's what
that keeps you going, and that is the thing that keeps you going.
And it's like having a light going on without sounding really ridiculous, but you know, he talks about conscientization, doesn't he? I can never say that word, you know, theory, but
I know what you mean.
It's dead right, you know, I mean, that's it. It's like a kind of flame being, I don't know.
And we're so lucky, you know, if we have that thing, I think.
Yeah. And I got
I
that.
don't think I'd have got on otherwise. Got on with life.
I mean, I've always been motivated by that flame, but it kind of became like a torch when I started to read about adult education and think about my dad's experience, you know, as a lens on that kind of transformational, and even that's overused, but that kind of quality of change that it wrought in him, and pain and discomfort, because it's not an easy process. It's bloody hard.
You had it when you I'll never forget when I went, even when I went to Colleague, which was no great shakes. I mean, I went back to work at Liverpool John Moore's packing hampers, and I'd been a shop steward when I left, and I was ostracised. Not exactly ostracised, but I was between. I wasn't.
I've lost my home. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. You know, the whole.
How dare they? Actually, is retrospect, you know.
Yeah, exactly. That's right, because you don't fit in one place or the other. I mean, and I never have, so I recognise that state very much. And you know, my dad coming back and not really knowing where he fit anymore.
No.
You know, but it's something about I mean, I am sentimental about the life of the mind, though. You know, that if that's the right expression, it's not. I'm not wistful about it. I believe it. You know, I believe that's where we fly. That's where we're free.
Oh, I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
You know, I used to have that Milton quote on my wall at work. You know, in my old job, which was, you know, the mind can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven. And I'd think about people being imprisoned, and God, I mean, that'd be my worst fear. But you know. But that notion that your mind enables you to be free in some ways.
But it's also actually, I mean, I'm going to completely muck up Marx. It's about material. It's about historical materialism. Yeah. It's actually about mind over matter. It's the rational winning out of irrational. It's you know, it's what you and I, and that's we've seen ourselves as kindred spirits, I think, is, you know, we are sentimental and we are daft and we can have a good week and we can be very utopian, but we're also, we measure that and we balance that by also being quite sort of clear about things and what needs to be done and to put things in context. And actually, it's my mother and father who are both IL peers, you know, at a time when it wasn't, you know, they're both socialists, I suppose, of one kind or another. But my father used to say, "Mind over matter, Cilla, mind over matter." And you know, I mean, I'm not for one. It's not that I'm elevating me or it or anything, but I know that's how I've got. You know, through my life, I thought, Cilla, you've got to stop this now. This isn't right, you know, or whatever it's been. I have stopped and thought about things, or and consciously done it. Actually, exactly. And I suppose perhaps that means sometimes I'm a bit intolerant, and I hold my hands up about that. I try not to be, and I think my values mean that tends not to happen. But if I didn't have that value frame, I'd be a bit intolerant, you know, if I'm honest.
I'm sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think get a grip is really short.
Get a grip is kind of where my head's like quite a lot of the time. Well, listen to people.
But isn't that interesting? No, you know what? That's been really valuable for me.
Yeah, and me as well. It's been way more than an interview. It's been a conversation that's really powerful, I think.